Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Rivero. Thank you for joining us. President Trump is threatening a government shutdown ahead of the midterm election in an effort to get funding for his border wall. On Sunday, he tweeted, "I would be willing to shut down government if the Democrats do not give us the votes for border security, which includes the wall." Today, he continued that push, calling for tougher immigration policies. But the president has had trouble getting Republicans on board, and it's unclear how he's planning to get that to change before voters head to the polls come November. Nancy Cortez has more.
I certainly don't like playing shutdown politics.
Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson was one of several Republicans this weekend actively discouraging the White House from courting a shutdown.
I don't think it'd be helpful, so let's try and avoid it.
The shutdown threat was a presidential attempt at hardball over his long-sought funding for a border wall. But the Senate's Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, said Congress may not be able to get to that until December at the earliest.
Is the funding of the border wall going to wait until after the midterm elections?
Probably, and that's something we do have a disagreement on.
McConnell and House Speaker Paul Ryan met with the president last week to discuss the fall legislative agenda and the obstacles to quick funding of the wall.
The president's willing to be patient to make sure that we get what we need so that we can get that done, because border security is extremely important.
But the president's patience now appears to be wearing thin, though he has backed off similar threats before.
If we don't change it, let's have a shutdown. We'll do a shutdown, and it's worth it for our country.
The yeas are 71, the nays
That
are
time
28.
there was a shutdown, but it lasted just a couple hours. And with the midterm elections looming, Republicans are hoping to avoid a shutdown of any length.
We're going to make sure we keep the government open, but we're going to get better policies on immigration.
And Scott Wong is a senior staff writer for The Hill. He joins me now. Scott, thanks for being with us. How complicated would a government shutdown be for Republicans heading into the midterms?
Well, a shutdown is not what GOP leaders want to be talking about with just months to go before the midterm elections. Obviously, the House and the Senate are up for grabs. Democrats think they have a very good shot of taking back the House. As your segment just noted, Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan were just over there at the White House with Donald Trump, and Paul Ryan came back to the Capitol and said Donald Trump is going to be patient. He's not going to push for this border wall at this time until after the midterms. And then just a few days later, President Trump tweets that he wants a government shutdown if Congress can't move forward on the border funding. And so it's just another example of GOP leadership and the president sort of on different messages, not on the same page and not where they want to be with just months to go before the election.
And efforts to pass immigration reform have failed in both the House and the Senate. Is there any indication then why the president wants to focus on this now?
I think it is political for the president. You know, a lot of lawmakers are back in their districts now. The president wants to turn up the heat, not only on Democrats, but also on members of his own party who failed to get border funding done in this year. And so he wants to energize conservative activists. They're going to put pressure on Republicans in Congress when these Republicans are back home in their districts campaigning for re-election. And it's good for the president. It energizes his base. Not so good for Republicans who are facing very difficult elections in the midterms.
So these tweets then are aimed as much at Republicans then as Democrats?
I think you can argue that. The president has used Twitter to put pressure on members of his own party in the past when it comes to repealing Obamacare or passing tax reform last year. And I think the same can be said with immigration. This is, as you recall, immigration and the border wall was a central issue for the president during the 2016 campaign. It is one of the major issues that the president and the Republicans have not been able to deliver on for the voters that stuck with them in that 2016 election. The president's obviously frustrated. His patience is running thin, and so he wants to see action on that border wall.
Oh, yeah. He campaigned on putting that wall up so quickly. I believe I can quote him by saying your head will spin. So it's definitely that has not been the case. At the same time, CBS News polling finds 41% of Americans believe the long-term effect of tariffs will lead to worse trade deals down the line. 36% say they will lead to better deals. So that is nearly split among the farming community. How are Republicans trying to navigate the tariff battle going into the midterm as well?
It's very difficult for Republicans. I think this is yet another issue that's put them in a tricky spot just months to go before the election. You know, a lot of the Republicans do have farming communities in their districts. Those are farmers that are very influential. They give money. They are political donors, and obviously they're pro-business. And Republicans typically have not been fans of tariffs in the past. Paul Ryan has explicitly called tariffs a tax, and as we know, Republicans hate taxes. And so this has put them in a very tricky situation before the midterm elections. And once again, another issue where congressional Republicans are not on the same page with the president of their own party.
Now, Scott, the House is currently in recess. What do Republicans actually want to accomplish when they come back, but before November's election?
Well, on the campaign trail, they want to be talking about some of the successes. They want to be talking about the booming economy, 4.1 growth in GDP. They want to be talking about how tax reform has put more money in the pockets of Americans around the country. Of course, the number one issue that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate want to be talking about is the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. That fight will happen either in late summer or early part of the fall. And that, Mitch McConnell believes, will be a winner for Republicans both in the Senate, in the House. You know, the Supreme Court is something that will last generations. And so if Mitch McConnell can secure that confirmation, perhaps lure a couple Democratic votes over to his side of the aisle and get a second conservative justice appointed to that Supreme Court, they will see that as a success heading into the November midterms.
So that's on their list of things to get done. Now, Scott, I want to switch gears a moment here. President Trump and his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, are lashing out at the Mueller probe. For months, the president has argued there was no collusion. Today, Giuliani took a different approach. Here he is talking about Paul Manafort's time with the campaign on CNN. Let's listen.
4 months. They're not going to be colluding about Russians, which I don't even know if that's a crime, colluding about Russians.
Okay.
You start analyzing the crime. The hacking is the crime. The hacking is the crime.
That certainly is the original
Well, the president didn't hack.
Of course not. That's the original
He didn't pay them for hacking.
All right, so there you have Rudy Giuliani questioning whether colluding is a crime. Is this a new strategy?
I don't know if it's a new strategy. It's certainly not the issue that Republicans and the White House want to be talking about before the midterm elections. I think you're seeing a lot of moving parts this week. Manafort tomorrow will be on trial. His trial kicks off on banking and tax evasion charges. You've seen Michael Cohen and these tapes that are coming out, almost 200 tapes of him speaking with the president that he recorded when he was the president's attorney, and some real sense now that Michael Cohen will be working with the federal government and the Mueller investigation, possibly against the president. And so there's just a lot of moving parts. And I think this story, the Russia investigation, also the Manafort and the Cohen investigations will be dominating the month of August as attention sort of shifts away from Washington and we start to see a slowdown in Washington. I think the media is going to start focusing more and more on the Russia investigation.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, CBS News polling found 70% of Republicans believe the Russia investigation is a political witch hunt. On the flip side, 77% of Democrats say it's a critical matter of national security. Does either party want to make this part of their messaging for 2018?
I think so. I think in the case of Republicans, the people who are still with the president are his diehard loyalists. And as long as the president can continue to sow doubt about the Mueller investigation, you mentioned the president's tweets. He talked about the angry Democrats working for the Mueller investigation, trying to create uncertainty and suggest that there's a political motivation behind the Mueller investigation. These are the only people, because the president's approval numbers are so low, it looks like these are the only folks that are still sticking with the president. But the president's only play at this point, I think, to generate excitement on his side of the aisle is to turn out the loyal Republican supporters that have been with him for day one. And so in that sense, I think that's where some of these tweets are coming from, hoping to generate a big turnout in the November election.
All right, Scott Wong from The Hill, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.